You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have our first guest of the program today, and I'm happy to welcome Daniel Halper, who's with the Weekly Standard, and he's got a very interesting article. And Daniel, first I want to thank you for joining us, and we've been reading a lot of different things, and you cover so many different issues. I think we could spend a lot of time with you today, but this particular discussion is going to be on a blog that you had on Hillary's new book, which evidently is a bomb, meaning it's not as successful as they had hoped it would be. But I'll let you let our audience know what you've discovered as you've been researching some of this.
Well, thanks so much for having me first. I report on the Clintons a little bit. I actually have a book coming out on the Clintons next month. So I've been thinking about this for a while and have been reporting on this for a while. On Hillary's book, I spoke to a Simon & Schuster insider who told me that, in his opinion, the book had bombed. It had underperformed the reportedly $14 million advance that she had reportedly received before she wrote the book, before she turned in the book. My numbers were that, according to this source, that 60,000 hard copies had been sold and 23,000 ebooks had been sold in the first week. There is some dispute over the numbers, I will say. CNN is now reporting that the hardcovers are closer to 80,000. So regardless, it's 20,000 difference. According to my source, the Simon & Schuster insider, the Hillary book was supposedly, they were hoping it would get 150,000 hard copies. So either way, it's fallen a lot short of where they were hoping this book would come in at.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And, of course, I think that this is a different kind of case because usually if you write a book, for most people, even selling, in the thousands could be successful depending on the type of book it is. But in this particular case, when you're somebody who's, she's amongst one of the, top 5 or 10 most known families in the entire world, and you would think that, just in this nation alone, they'd be flying off the shelves if it was really worth reading. And so I'm actually surprised, to be honest with you, because I was shocked at how many people went out and purchased Barack Obama's books, which I actually read through, and they were sort of interesting in themselves. But
well, keep in mind also that most people, when they roll out their books, you're exactly right. I would love for my book to bomb as badly as her book is bombing, right? So, it sounds like I'm mocking her, but I'm not. I'm not going out to hour-long specials on ABC and then another hit on Good Morning America and then another hit on NBC and then CBS, and I'm not getting time on all the networks. You know what I mean? And neither did Elizabeth Warren, and neither have all these other even political figures who are fairly known if you follow politics. Whose books came out, they haven't been getting the kind of rollout and the kind of treatment that Hillary Clinton has been getting. And they haven't. And Hillary Clinton, keep in mind, has also been a public figure for nearly 30 years. And so she is known. Everybody turns on, everybody's supposedly interested in what she has to say, yet nobody's buying her book. I mean, it does make you wonder whether or not there is maybe less interest in a possible Hillary Clinton presidential run than others might have suggested coming into this moment.
No, that's an excellent point. And just on a side note, I want to say, in this business, and I'm sure you come across many as well, we have many friends who write books on all different topics. Some could be historical topics that may even only interest a few thousand people in total. And some of them are fantastic, and people such as yourself spend so much time and effort into producing this stuff. But I think what happens in the case of her book, how much of it's fact, how much of it's fiction, how much did she actually write, how many people concocted things for it to sound the right way for the political run or the campaign, and I think that's the problem with some of these particular books. And I think you're absolutely right. I think she may be overplayed, and I think maybe the American people are ready to move on and try something else to resolve our problems.
But it is, I mean, and you hit on a good point, though. It is also a content issue. If it were a good book, you know, a tell-all, and you really felt like you were getting Hillary Clinton's unvarnished opinion, I think it would be a runaway seller. I mean, I'd love to read that. The problem is that nobody actually thinks this is what Hillary Clinton sincerely believes, and this is how she sincerely views the world. That's the real problem here, is that there's a lack of sincerity in the actual writing. Yeah, of course there were ghostwriters. Of course she had her team, her book team as she called them, read over everything. I'm sure her husband, she had tons of political consultants and advisors make sure that nothing she said could come back to hurt her later in a 2016 presidential campaign. But, you know, it's a content issue also. It's just boring. And the problem, though, for her is that the same boringness, I'd argue, has been reflected in a lot of her media appearances. So when she did that hour-long town hall on CNN, what did people learn that was new about her? What was unvarnished about Hillary Clinton? You know, on various issues she sort of passed. On various issues, you sort of got the sense that she wasn't really telling what she really, truly believed. And so if that's the case, if it's just going to be Hillary Clinton again as a product of all these campaign consultants, I'm not sure there's a lot of interest in that.
No,
that's
I
what
agree.
You're looking at when she contemplates a presidential run. Sorry.
Oh, sure. No, I agree with that assessment. And John, my co-host here, wants to chime in on a few things, so I'm going to let him join the conversation. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Dan, you know, it's interesting. I watched a couple of Hillary interviews recently, and I also got to see Hillary up close and personal a few weeks ago. And my take is Hillary is very polished, but as you said, not particularly candid. And my sense in reading the audience is that Hillary is a bit of a star, and she's quite impressive in what she has accomplished, maybe from a recognition standpoint. But other than maybe that 1/3 of the party that is absolute, 1/3 of the public that is absolutely diehard party politics, it seems to me that Hillary's book, and most every appearance that I have seen her do in the recent history, is all about whitewashing the millions of miles of failed foreign policy travel that she's done, and essentially what she's asking people to do is pay for her PR. Am I wrong in this assessment?
Not just pay for her PR. Keep in mind, she's filling her coffers at every stop. You know, it's not as though she's doing these appearances for free. Now, I'm not suggesting that the networks at all are paying her, but she's hawking a book, and every sale, you know, stands to make her more money. Now, she has to make back the advance first, and the chances of her doing that with such a large advance aren't so big. But there's almost there is a self-interest in her coming out and hawking this book. And, of course, she's a star in her way. She has an unparalleled resume. There is no former First Lady who has served as a U.S. Senator and then served as the Secretary of State and has been around in the public eye for that long. I mean, you know, if Hillary was speaking down the street, I'd take my daughter, of course, to go see her. I'm sure I'd want to go see her. Anybody would want to see her. It's an unparalleled. She sort of fits this unparalleled mold, but it's the contents. Once you get there, she can fill a room, but once they get there, then what? Are they being let down? Are they not coming back for more? Are they not telling their friends to go buy a book? That's how it seems to me.
I think that there might be some backlash that we're seeing on this book for two other reasons. One, not just as Brett said, people are maybe tired of the Clintons as they're tired of the Bushes, but possibly the fact that I think people have been force-fed Hillary by the mainstream media to such an extent that they probably are just, you know, at some point you just don't want to have peanut butter and jelly yet again for lunch. And I wonder how much of that actually falls into people's response. And the other part of that is, remember what she just said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about how poor when they left the White House. You know, she made herself out to be just one of the little people, so poor. I didn't even know where I'd be able to buy my next Happy Meal. And so I wonder if all that disingenuousness isn't going to come back to haunt her in the nature of book sales or lack thereof.
Well, it appears to have already. I mean, a larger question is, will it come back to haunt her in the 2016 presidential campaign? it's pretty clear it did the last time around. It didn't. Her veneer didn't go over well with the American public in 2008. And it's not, I shouldn't even say the American public, with Democratic voters. That's where her problem has always been, with Democratic voters. And so I'm not sure it will play well. I think you're right. I think that presents a real opening for Democrats if another Democratic candidate wanted to get in. You know, if you're Elizabeth Warren, you're sitting on the sidelines and you're watching this rollout and you're watching the book sales and you're watching all this, why aren't you thinking to yourself, yeah, you know, why not? It's worth a shot. I'm 65. If I don't do it now, I'm not going to have another chance. Why shouldn't she run? Why shouldn't any of them run? I think if there's a silver lining, it does sort of democratize the process, because instead of this coronation, I believe several Democrats will be looking at this and say, it's worth a shot. She is certainly beatable.
That's a good point, and quite frankly, I would actually pay money to watch Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton have debates. I think that would be entertaining in itself and one for the record books. But, you know, I have to mention, because you brought up the fact that the incredible resume that Hillary Clinton has managed to build up over time, and I think there's somebody in the other party who has done so as well, and that's Condoleezza Rice. I think she's a remarkable, brilliant, true analyst, compassionate on so many issues, and I read her book and I thought it was fantastic. And you know, in comparing it to I haven't read Hillary's book, and quite frankly, I really don't want to. But I very much enjoyed what Condoleezza Rice had to say, and I would love to see her, just to throw another accomplished woman into the ring here, to get into the race in 2016. But Dan, if we can, I'd love to have you comment on that. But you have a couple interesting stories that you've put out in the last few days, including, I think it was today, you were just reminding us that Obama's having lunch with Paul Krugman and some other economists. But I have a question on that, because it seems to me that we're in the sixth year of trying to get our economy fixed. And how many times we've read the storyline, the president's going to do something to help the economy. And I'm like, what exactly is he going to do differently this time?
Yeah, well, I'll take your first point first. To Condoleezza Rice, I can understand the attraction, and she's always talked about it as a possible running mate for Mitt Romney. I sort of see her running as a big fat chance. I mean, I say that skeptically, not there is no chance of her running. I think she's an academic. She's a really smart, intelligent, and actually an intellectual. She's a Russian historian and understands sort of foreign policy. Now, you can argue with some of her policy decisions, but she's a very smart woman. She's also not a politician. She's never run for political office. I think that's my attraction. Starting at the top. I can understand it, yeah, and you can see that's the attraction to Ben Carson and all these people. I just can't really see her deciding, you know what, this is my year. She sort of hasn't been involved in a way. And I think not being involved, like a Jeb Bush and somebody like that who hasn't been involved in the last few years, I think it really hurts them, you know, because where were they when Republicans were fighting Obamacare? Where were they when Republicans were fighting Obama's withdrawal from the world? Where were they when Republicans were fighting Obama and all these issues? You don't see Condoleezza Rice. You don't see Jeb Bush. You don't know where they stand on these things. Now, you can assume safely that they're probably against Obamacare and all these other issues. But where were they? You know, like now they're going to come in all of a sudden. I think that really hurts people who haven't been engaged in the political process for the last 6 years. I think it makes it really difficult for them to jump in. And to Obama's point, or to the point about Obama meeting with Paul Krugman, I don't know what he's trying to achieve, except probably he likes Paul Krugman's company. I mean, it's hard to imagine that Krugman has another policy idea that he hasn't laid out in the hundreds of New York Times columns that he's printed since Obama's become president of the United States. It's hard to believe that Paul Krugman's been holding any economic policy idea back, yet Obama doesn't know where to go but to the usual places. He's not, in a weird way, he's not creative in a way that you might expect him to. A man with not much to lose, he's not going to, he doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. in that sense, why wouldn't he sort of branch out to somebody else? Why would he go to the normal suspects? I think it doesn't speak well for him, and I think you could argue whether or not that's whether or not him taking Paul Krugman's advice up until now, at least to certain degrees, has helped the economy or not. I would suggest, and I think you would agree with me, that it probably hasn't helped, and you might be better served seeking help elsewhere.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. And I think if we could just step back a little bit and recap some of this presidency, there have been numerous committees and assignments where they've selected businessmen and industry leaders and put them in a room to come up with a plan to help cure the economy. And of course, there's been many different reports and suggestions presented to the president, and for the most part, they've been ignored. And he's followed his this interesting economic path, if you will. And the fact is that we haven't performed up to par in past economic recoveries after any, whatever you want to call it, recession, depression, or the worst economic times, however they want to call it. We've performed poorly in comparison to other times, and there are the bottom line is there are a lot of Americans that would like to have jobs and quality jobs and be able to support themselves and their families, and they're not necessarily able to do that because of the decisions that are being made, not just by Obama, but for the most part by various parts of the administration and in the states as well. And I think you're right. The president should be seeking new guidance and new ideas and trying to become creative and say, hey, we'll try your way, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then you prove that my way was better anyway. How does he lose? And what do they say the definition of insanity is? Trying the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results. I mean, it's insane to sort of go back to the same people and try. Why wouldn't you try something? If you want different results, why wouldn't you try something different? It doesn't seem logical. Of course, from their perspective, they don't see it that way. President Obama sees it that if he were to have his way, everything would be solved. He would remake America in his eyes. And the problem is that Republicans are standing in his way. Of course, it doesn't quite add up. The facts aren't quite there, but that's how they see the issue. Absolutely. Daniel, do you have time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. You were covering this too, and I hadn't had a chance to fully read it, but I'd be curious to your thoughts on what's going on in Iraq right now. And we've had conversations with several people who write for various papers, such as yourself, who've covered this particular area for years, and you guys certainly know quite a bit and have formulated your opinions over time. But this is one case where I personally am at a loss at what we should do. I mean, I have ideas, but this is a very, very tough situation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the problem in the public debate is that a lot of people want to focus on the decisions that got us here. And I'm not saying none of those are relevant, but the decisions, for instance, I saw Harry Reid tweeted earlier today that we shouldn't pay any attention to the people who got us into this mess in the first place. I mean, that's very nice, but Harry Reid was a voter. He voted in favor of sending American troops to Iraq. So did Hillary Clinton. So did Joe Biden. So the same people, are basically in charge. He's not calling them the architects, but the people who enabled this plan are in charge. So I think it's sort of insane to go back and relitigate what got us here at this moment. I think there's just too much going on in Iraq, and I think the problem is clear. The problem is that you have Iran on the one side, and you have Al Qaeda on the other side, and so a lot of people. So there's this tension of, do you side with Iran in fighting Al Qaeda, or do you side with or how does that work out? And I don't think it needs to be that way. I think you can side with Iraq, try to beat back both, and try to prevent an alliance between the Maliki government and Iran. I think the concern is, of course, you have basically an Al Qaeda state in Iraq if you don't do anything, and I think most Americans would agree that would be a really bad result. Only a decade and a half after 9/11, having an Al Qaeda state would mean that the lives lost in Iraq and in Afghanistan were lost in vain. And I think preventing that, should be the first and foremost goal right here, and of course, not empowering Iran at the same time is also incredibly important. Something the Obama administration has signaled they might be willing to do, to partner with Iran in order to beat back Al Qaeda.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said, that the key is you don't want an Al Qaeda state, and we certainly don't want to get in bed with Iran. I've been saying this for about a week now, I think the administration's actually been working with Iran, not just on this issue, but other issues, and they just haven't informed us of it yet. And I'm afraid of the cooperation.
Well, they have informed us to some degree that they want to work with Iran on a nuclear program. I mean, it's not, this isn't conspiratorial. John Kerry was asked, are military options with Iran, in working in tandem with Iran on the table, and he said nothing's off the table. He didn't rule it out. And these are people who are careful with their words. They know the implications of their words. It's not that they don't make mistakes, but I'm fairly certain they didn't walk that back, and that was not a mistake. This is something that they are deeply considering, and it's very troubling, I think.
John has a real quick one for you.
Yeah, I would just say to both of you guys, I think the biggest concern here on this subject would be that the behind-the-scenes deal would be we just need the Iranians to pretend that they're not going nuclear long enough for Obama to ride through this election cycle, and his quid pro quo for that would be to allow Iranian hegemony to have success in Iraq. Because that seems to be the game that's being played. At the end, though, it becomes a huge double-down win for Iran and a double-down loss for America, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge. I don't know anything about that specifically. I don't know what Iran would be waiting for. Presumably, if they got a nuclear weapon, that would be it. Not it would be it in the sense that the world would be over, but that would be it in the strategy. If U.S. foreign policy toward Iran for the last, 10, 20 years has all been dictated on preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, that would severely alter U.S. foreign policy regardless of who the president was. And the policy would then not be to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, right? It would have to be something like containment, which I and I think a lot of other people would argue that that's probably not a viable long-term solution with Iran, who is the largest state sponsor of terror and who wants to destroy America and its allies. And so I'm not sure what the end game is. I don't see why Iran would have to wait the way you suggest it would, but I'd be curious to hear why you think that.
Well, it's not necessarily that Iran has to wait. Iran is waiting anyway. I believe Iran is not going to show their hand from a nuclear perspective until they have the delivery systems as well as the defense systems in place. It's more per se that Iran doesn't necessarily. I don't believe Iran wants a bloody fight with America, an overt bloody fight with America, and I think it realizes that Obama is so reluctant to use force in virtually any area, let alone an area that he's already vested in this commitment to achieving some sort of a negotiated peace or negotiated nuclear settlement with Iran. So I think that Iran is in a position to take control over the significant portion of Iraq, particularly the area that will give them the financial power over the oil fields, and it would not surprise me if part of that was not a negotiated agreement behind the scenes to give Obama the one win he seems desperate for at all costs, whether it's horrible in terms of long-term interest in America, which is to have some piece of paper that said, see, I successfully navigated with Iran something that no other American president could do, because it'll probably backfire after it's off his watch, and then he could blame it on Hillary or whoever else is in office next.
Yeah, well, look, you could be right. These are all nightmare scenarios, and I hope you're wrong.
I agree with that one. Daniel Halper, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little extra time talking about some of your other topics that you've been writing about, because they're all equally important, and so I thank you. But how could, outside of going to Weekly Standard, are there other places that people could follow you and find out more about you? And I know you've written some books over time as well, so if you want to take the opportunity, please go ahead and plug away.
Well, I've got a book coming out next month. It's called Clinton Inc., The Audacious Rebuilding of a Political Machine. That's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble for pre-order. So I, of course, encourage everybody to go out and order one for yourself and one for your friend.
Well, that sounds great. And, of course, we'd welcome you to come back on when your book is out to come discuss that as well. But Daniel Halper,
thank you.
Okay, great. Daniel Halper, online editor with the Weekly Standard. You can go to weeklystandard.com, and you can follow all of his latest articles and blogs and whatnot. Again, thank you so much, Daniel. We look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks a lot.
All right, take care.